what's a treat is to talk to someone who was on the inside to try to answer some of our questions from the outside. And, in your own words, what was Donald Trump?
Donald Trump, as best I can assess, is a person driven by self-interest. And in the case of politics, it's his reelection. And as I note in there, he seemed to be willing to sacrifice anything to get there, whether it was a policy objective or people or our institutions. And I'm an institutional person, if you will, when it gets to DOD and our national security apparatus. So that's how I kind of size it up right here on the spot.
When did you know? What's your first interaction with him where you know he's neither informed nor an institutionalist nor faithful to the office that he held?
Well, it's hard to pick a moment in time. You know, as I write in my book, the first realization that I had that this job would be really different than what I expected was when we were at Bedminster in August of 2019 discussing the Afghan withdrawal peace plan. And the president goes on this soundtrack, as I call it, of wanting to withdraw from NATO and bad-mouthing Angela Merkel. And next it's pulling all Americans out of Africa. We moved to South Korea and withdrawing troops. So you have this litany of things that go on there. And I try to push back on these at times with Chairman Joe Dunford at my side. But clearly this is an eye-opener for me that he is focused on these things. And again, outside the bounds of what conventional wisdom would be in traditional, my view, traditional Republican foreign policy.
When you leave an interaction with someone like Donald Trump, and whether it's the things you write about wanting to shoot protesters, whether it's the extreme ignorance that led to numerous reports of some senior military officials calling him an idiot. Rex Tillerson was aghast at his lack of understanding of our alliances and our adversaries and why each fell into the other category. What was the conversation amongst yourselves about whether the country could survive 4 years?
Well, we never had conversations like that.
You never talked about whether the country,
not in terms of survival. Look, to be fair, Donald Trump put forward a number of traditional Republican policies, right? Lower taxes, less regulation, a stronger military, border security. Those are things I support, most Republicans support as well. And he made progress on many of them. The challenge was, in so many cases, he would go too far, right? I believe NATO allies should pay their fair of defense, but I wouldn't threaten to withdraw from the alliance to get there. I believe we should tackle drugs on the streets of America. I don't support shooting missiles into Mexico to do that. And so there was just this instinctive thing where you knew he was going too far. And I saw my role, my oath of office being number one, but to support him was to kind of offer up better solutions, more viable ones that would get to where he wanted to go, consistent with the things I outlined, but get to a better outcome. And I think that was the goal of myself and other cabinet members.
Tell the story of how he wanted to punish Admiral McRaven and Stanley McChrystal.
Yeah, I should have reviewed that before we came on. This came up because I think it was early 2020 or so when one of the two gentlemen wrote something in the paper, it was attributed to him, and the president reacted really badly. It was something about supporting Democrats, and it led to a series of things where General Milley and I were called into the Oval Office and asked about recalling, I think it was McRaven to active duty. And once we got there, it was McChrystal's name was thrown into the to the fray as well. And look, these are two great warriors, gentlemen, folks I respect and know. And to call them back on active duty, to consider court-martialing them for expressing their views was just out of bounds. And Milley and I pushed back on this, and Mark Milley, actually saved the day here and kind of proposed that he would go talk to these gentlemen and walk them back. And that was just enough to kind of get us off that spot and out of the office and move on to something else.
Well, and here's what you write in your book. Trump's loyalists tried to recall retired four-star officers back to active duty to court-martial them for criticizing the president. In early May 2020, stories appeared in outlets like Breitbart saying alleged retired Army General Stan McChrystal was advising Democrats on ways to use AI to track down and counter Trump supporters on social media. The next thing I knew, Mark Milley and I were sitting in front of the president trying to talk him out of recalling McChrystal to active duty. To make matters worse, by the time we arrived at the White House, someone in the Oval Office had thrown retired Navy Admiral William McRaven, the commander who organized the raid to kill Osama bin Laden, onto the bonfire. McRaven had also written things critical of Trump in the past. The president told Milley and me that he wanted to call them, McChrystal and McRaven, back to active duty and court-martial them for what they said. Quote, so disloyal, he would say. The discussion went back and forth in the Oval. Milley finally figured out a way to get the president to back down by promising to call them. So disloyal to whom? I guess I'm trying to understand from you, you were in the room, who he thought they were supposed to be loyal to.
To him? To him, the president, the commander-in-chief. And that was his view as not just, of course, active duty officers, but former retired officers. He thought that they had an obligation to be loyal in terms of what they said publicly or wrote publicly to the president.
But I guess what I'm trying to understand, did he ever understand that the military is loyal to the Constitution and the country? Did he ever, and does he today?
I don't know. I mean, again, you can only look at behavior and speech and assess that that's not the case.
Let's look at some speech. Because I think this is... It's a big book. It's an important book. You're speaking out, and your responses to Bret Baier are important, not just for the historical record, but for the future. Let me show you how he spoke about his generals,
sure,
which is what he called them.
I see my generals as generals are going to keep us so safe. These are central casting. If I'm doing a movie, I pick you, General.
Everybody knows exactly what happened, so... And what I do is I authorize my military.
I have generals that are great generals. My generals and my military, they have decision-making ability.
Again, as the most virulent carrier of this sort of anti-democratic virus in America, that man right there, how do you think he views the military today?
Well, it's hard to say today because, first of all, you're right. He considered them his generals, which was a terrible spot to put these officers into. And I describe another incident that happened May 9th, I think, 2020, just weeks before June 1st, where we all gather in the cabinet room to brief him on China. And he comes in, he's already upset about something else, and it escalates into, again, a 20-minute or so tirade, complaining about the military, complaining about the generals, that we can't win in Afghanistan, we can't beat the Chinese, that, he gave us $2.5 trillion and we're not the great military that we think we are. And I just thought it was a terrible display by the commander-in-chief.
Who was in there?
Myself, Chairman Milley, I think Mike Pompeo and the National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien were there, and then several of the Joint Chiefs. I think a couple were missing, but the Vice Chairman was there, the Chief of Staff of the Army was there. So for the most part, the Joint Chiefs, and the language was directed at them, and it really bothered me. And as much as I and Milley during this diatribe tried to interject and stop it or push back here and there, we just cannot arrest the conversation. And finally, it ended, and we were breaking up to go to dinner that night, and the chairman, the Joint Chiefs were being excused, and I had to pull Milley aside and said, look, you need to go talk to them. You need to calm them down and tell them we got this under control, because they were clearly, in my view, clearly rattled by what had happened and taken aback. And Milley understood and did that and talked to them.
But why not go talk to Trump? I mean, they didn't do anything wrong.
Well, look, we would have these conversations at times about engagement with the military. I had this conversation with him privately within the Oval about comments he made about traumatic brain injury in our troops in Iraq. And I talk about it in the book, where I had to pull him aside and say, Mr. President, what you're saying is not going over well with the troops. You've got to change your language. You just can't write this off as headaches. These soldiers and airmen were wounded in these missile strikes.
Secretary Austin has testified to, and they've taken aggressive actions to deal with extremism in the military. Do you see any tie between Donald Trump's worldview and what Secretary Austin is dealing with now?
I don't know. I personally don't think so. When I was...
He's the commander-in-chief, right? I mean, they reported to him, so they had to be calmed down after he was the one that was inappropriate. I mean, there's reverence for the chain of command in the military that people outside the military really can't even wrap their head around.
Yeah, but more importantly, there's a strong professional ethos. There are values that are instructed and ingrained into folks. I went into West Point at age 18, and duty on our country was drilled into me for 4 years. And then after that, in active duty, there is a strong professional ethos. They understand not just the chain of command, but they understand, much as I do. I mean, this is the purpose of my book, the title of my book, that your number one oath is to the Constitution, not to the president, not to the party. And look, at times, you have to be able to make those tough calls if you're getting an illegal or immoral order.